This comes back to unfolding the challenge and minimizing the extraneous ambiguity.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what it all is. I mean, or that's, if you don't have that, you don't have squat. That you can have all the accoutrements, and that's where they are now.
But but you can get at that by just caring about how children learn. You don't have to be some scientist about all this stuff. I mean, you can either get that from first-person attention to your own learning, or you can get that by observing any child. But you can't. But I think one of the big problems is that teachers have learned not to do either.
Well, it's hard for them to do. It's just, I mean, we just have to face the fact that it's hard for them to create corrections to things. They know their kids are having trouble, and they can tell you what they're having trouble with. They're not, schooled in how you would use inferences to figure out how you fix it up. Like if they knew some rules, if they had been taught that, they'd be able to do it. But if they'd been taught it, they'd throw out 98% of the programs they've got. They'd say, whoa, this really stinks. Let's revise it.
Doesn't this come back, though, to rather than thinking that the objective is this corpus of, specifications, I got to do this, we got to do this, we got to do this, we got to do this, that there's this overarching concern, this kind of trumping all the rest of it, that's contextualizing all the rest of it, that the most important thing that we're trying to do is to bring forth a coherent quality of participation from the inside out in this child, so that we can hook into that and we can engage that and unfold these challenges and so forth in the way that we're talking about. And that's the center line that we're staying on while we bring in all the rest of these objectives. And if we don't have that, we're lost.
Absolutely. But from the standpoint of someone doing it or designing it, it is scientific and it is abstract to the point that you're following rules. You're starting with this premise: I ought to do whatever I can to make the learning of that child successful, eminently efficient, and reinforcing to him, period.
Which means, in order to do that, if I double click on that and go deeper, it's the quality of their participation.
Right.
I've got to make contact with their participation.
Right, but see, that's where, that's where it all falls down. Because they think making contact means establishing rapport.
Talking about synchronous contact on the edge of these challenges.
Absolutely. That you need to know where they are, so you need to know, or so you can present stuff that is not precipitous for them, but that stretches them a little bit. And that they'll be able to succeed, so they succeed at a high enough rate. Like if they succeed on 75% of what they do, even, like on new learning material, we say they got to be 70% first time correct. They know they are far more likely to get it the first time than they're not.
Right, and this connects back to the emotional piece. When I brought up the emotional piece, we went into somewhat of a tangential response, which was how that gets distorted. A concern for emotionality gets distorted into trying to make everything feel good.
Right.
But it's not the positive side of that concerns me, and what we're talking about
it's
here,
the
negative side.
Yeah.
It's what happens if we're not meeting them in a way that's instructionally necessary for who they are, and they learn to develop in a negative emotional affective response. That undermines everything. I mean, the core of our thing, and I want you to comment on this, is this. It's this simple. And I think this is where you and I really meet. We've created a situation in which our children are experiencing a uniquely unnatural kind of confusion. It's a kind of confusion that this organism didn't grow up doing, didn't evolve to deal with.
Right.
It's a cultural, social, technological kind of confusion that's not natural to the organism, on the one hand. On the other hand, because of how we contextualize that and how we instruct, meet, parent, the whole field around children as they're experiencing this confusion, they're learning to feel as if this confusion is a reflection of something wrong with them.
Absolutely.
And as they start to feel shame in relation to confusion, then they want to start avoiding being confused,
Right.
feeling confused,
Right.
Pre-consciously, faster than
Right.
conscious. So when children want to avoid feeling confused, it's decapitating learning.
Right. Yeah, no, they will escape from the situation one way or another.
Well, this seems to be to me, this seems very centrally misperceived, not understood in the education community.
Well, see, it's misunderstood, I guess, largely because they wouldn't know what to do about it if they saw it. I mean, if they knew that that's what they were doing, they don't know exactly how to undo it because they have so many, or there are such pandemic misconceptions about what kids are and how they learn.
We've gone down the track with the self-esteem movement where people thought that it was possible to pump up somebody's positivity absent their actual experience from the inside of effectiveness. What I hear you saying is look, let's discard that. That doesn't go anywhere. Kids feel good when they know that they're able to meet the challenges that they're actually faced with, right? And that there's no fooling them about that.
Right.
Right?
Well, kids are very lawful. I mean, they're as lawful as daylights. If you know how they respond to reinforcement and you know how they respond to failure, you can predict what they're going to like, how you can turn them on, and you can have a lot of fun working with them because you don't have to be afraid of them, and you don't have to be uncertain about things. You know what they're going to do as a function of what you do.
That comes back to you've got to pay a different kind of attention to the correspondence between your instruction and what's being learned and how the children are participating. What kind of errors are a consequence of the participation you're calling for and how you're instructing.
Right. And you have to take any of their errors as information about something you did wrong. And, you may explore the possibilities and say, well, I didn't do anything wrong. And then you're stuck with it. But in most cases, you will find out you did something wrong, that it was your fault, not their fault.
If you're learning oriented in your teaching.
Right. But I mean, the problem, in getting that to teachers, it'd be wonderful if we had a system where they really learned about teaching, where they had the opportunities that we did, which is to work with kind of hard to teach kids who didn't know a lot, who were preschool age, and who would make every kind of mistake imaginable. And then you would learn all about mistakes. You'd learn all about correcting them. You'd learn all about the cost of not correcting them in a timely fashion. You'd learn about all of the ways to buttress against mistakes, how you can do it with timing, how you can do it with pattern, how you can do it with pacing, and how you can do it spuriously, and how you can do it without any spurious cues. And then when you get there, now you're in a position to, make some really intelligent decisions about how you're going to configure instruction.
Well, what right here, one of the things that seems to keep teachers, obviously teachers are like the rest of us, and they make an investment in their identity as a teacher and a particular way of doing things that they, as we start to talk about some of these other things, pushes against that in a way that they don't feel very good about and that they want to recoil from. There's a shame aversion to, what do you mean I'm wrong in how I'm teaching? Right. That's one piece of it.
Right. But if you can't correct it, what good does it do to tell?
Part of the way that loops in, it seems to me, that prints the license for that kind of thinking is, well, I care about the whole child, not just this robotic conformance to, the assessments and measurements of the education system.
Right. There's
a failure to understand the self-esteem negative consequences of the way we're doing things.
Right.
There was a failure to understand the enormous emotional, sociological, behavioral consequences of the fact that we're disabling the learning in most of our children because of our ignorance and negligence in the way that we instruct.
Yeah. I agree. It's sort of like a vicious cycle because you can't blame teachers for not knowing what they don't know. They have never been taught it. They've been taught misrules, or they've been taught totally superficial stuff. They've never been brought to a hard criterion in working with kids, particularly hard to teach kids. And a lot of them are reinforced because they work now with higher performing kids. And if you do a reasonable job and they're not beginning level kids, you'll get by that they will learn passably, often well. And I'm not saying that there aren't good teachers with older kids. I'm saying that the kind of knowledge you need to work with the failed kid or the beginning reader who's hard to teach, or the beginning reader that shouldn't be hard to teach but is because he or she happens to just be one that picked up on the miscues or that the teacher gave them and is trying to follow the bad advice that the teacher gave, is now very confused. But to get them to that point,
I think we have to start by saying, look, it's not your fault. I agree with where you're going. I don't think it's the teacher's fault. I think it's a transmissional problem that's multi-generational. And if it indicates anything, it indicates a lack of leadership in the learning sciences, in science in general, and in educational policy.
Right. Well, right. And most of all in instruction, that, like the bottom line for instruction, instructional theory, and all of the accoutrements are strictly based on environmental variables. In other words, what did you put in there? What was your dependent variable? What is the specific behavior of the kids? Don't give me some general glop. Don't give me a grade level. Give me response by response to task by task. And that's the information that you really need to be a good diagnostician.
On the one hand, you could black box the child in a way that you're talking about in terms of the outcome that you want and the intervention or educational system that you're going to put them through, and say, almost independent of whatever their inner variation is, that the instructional objective in itself has a structure. It has itself has a series of progressions that the child must go through relative to it, independent of them, so to speak. And that plus feedback from them, if we adjust to it, is what we need to move them down the line.
Oh, yeah.
But this comes back to how well our assessment of them lines up so that they're on the right starting point going into it, and how finally our ongoing assessment allows us to tune our responses to them so that we're actually meeting what they need along the way in our steps.
Right. I agree totally. That translated into, this stair-step program idea, it means simply that you can use every single lesson, every single task, and every lesson as a test if you have appropriate criteria. When you get to that level, then you need to have like coherence, so that everything you do is pointing to like the kid in terms of her instructional needs, not just necessarily what she wants to do. I mean, it's different from child-centered. It's child reference. Like when we changed the programs, the first thing we did was we'd give them a list of problems or a list of words, so they at least get the sequence straight without, doing a bad sequence. And that helped. But they would still get into all kinds of problems. Whenever they went to correct a mistake, they would get wordy, they would get redundant, they would start appealing to things that the kids didn't know. They would try to be intuitive and say, well, look, you can see the difference. No, obviously he can't see the difference, or he wouldn't have made that mistake.
But what makes it obvious or not obvious is the degree to which the teacher's general orientation is syncing up with that child, rather than way back in some map of their own about the assumptions of what's going on.
Absolutely.
So how do we create environments in where the teacher's learning first person, not theoretical, not by buying into you or to me or to anybody's ideas, but they're first person getting how fundamentally important it is to be able to read, sync up with what's going on inside the child.
Well, the only way that I know how to do that is to do it by the numbers, teach them the things they need to know first, second, third, where they can get to the point where they're not going to just do blind experimentation and be doing things that are crazy and going nowhere. Teachers who are, far from the mark, which, like most of them are, because they've never really been taught technical details of teaching. They've been taught some of them are good at managing kids. Some of them are good at, they have a nice way with kids and they present clearly. But to put it all together so what they're saying has the right timing, says the right things, and is easy to correct and so forth, is in a sequence. The only way you can do that is, or that I know, in any reasonable length of time, which is why we arrived at the format we arrived at, is to basically script it, put them through it so that they don't have to attend to all the details of the wording. They don't have to attend to the details of sequence, review, any of that greatly. All they have to do is learn how to interact with those kids. And, there are simple interactions, giving them feedback. There are a little more complicated ones involving corrections. Then there are, quote, motivating ones where you're using information to show them that they're smart and that what they're doing is worthwhile, that they have adopted the role of a good learner, and you really appreciate that, and it's really helping them grow.
My question is, I went into a school and talked with the reading coordinator. They're using reading mastery. And we talked about it, and how's the script working? I'm starting to explore this, and she says, oh, I love it. My teachers, they don't even have to think. This was the response.
Yeah.
I love it. They don't even have to think about what they're doing.
No.
So where does that fit in?
Number one, that can't possibly be true because you're not doing a solo act. It's not a monologue, it's teaching. That you're presenting tasks to the kids, and depending on how they respond, that determines the next thing you're going to do. That if they respond correctly, you're going to reinforce that response and move on. If not, you're going to go back and you're going to correct it so they're able to do that correctly. Okay, this is not brain dead activity. I'm sorry, this requires attention. Teachers are often not very good at that. They can't hear the responses. Their pacing is wrong, so that they have a group that is led by some kids. Like if there's anything that really kills learning in kids, it's when a group response cannot function for the teacher as giving information about all the individuals. So a group response is like an individual response that's done 8 times as fast if you have 8 kids in the group. All right, that's what it is. And that's how it functions from the standpoint of information. But if you have one where the teacher's timing is bad, everybody, what word? Some kid, man, or they'll fake it like a man, could be mad, it could be anything. Or if some of them are coming in at different times, whoa, all you know about, if the response is correct, is that the first kid that responded did it correctly. The rest, all bets are off because they could have been copying the responses. So for them to do it right, to perform minimally in interacting with those kids, there is one heck of a lot that they have to learn, and a heck of a lot they have to practice.
There's just nothing more important, given any long-range view of human problems, culture problems, the dilemma that human beings face in the world, than stewarding the health of the learning of the children. Absolutely. I mean, that is the ground of everything in the future.
Right.
Not what they're learning about in particular, that's important, but the overall health of learning is what connects to the future more than any particular. This is the miracle to me. Whether you come at this from a point of view, as many do, of an utter disregard for the interior life and experience of the children. You come at this like we're harvesting crops. we're harvesting the bot crops we need for our economy and our society, and we really don't give a damn about what's going on inside them. We don't care about that. Or we come at this from the perspective of this compassionate, loving care for who they are as human beings, and helping them find their way into the world in a way that they can be authentically who they are, while finding opportunities in the world that nourish who they are and allow them to be successful and happy. And that's what our primary concern is. You end up in the same place.
Right.
That's a profound miracle to me.
Right. Right.
So there is a violent agreement that hasn't been able to happen yet. I mean, there's an implicit agreement that just hasn't been bridged between these different factions.
Right. And I think a lot of it just has to do with expectations. That the rhetoric is often one thing and the actual expectations are different. It's like that there are two standards. One drives everything, and it's totally philosophical for some people, that they're really not looking at the kids. Or if they do look at kids, it's selected kids, like maybe, really smart kids who flatter the daylights out of them by doing the things that they say all kids should be able to do. But they're sure not looking at a lot of the kids that we work with. And if they had and seriously looked at them, and they were concerned at all, had any kind of comparative idea of what these kids could achieve, they would think differently. But I don't really think they have a good comparative idea of what these kids could really do.
But let's not talk about the experts or leaders of these tribes that go off and to the left and the right of the things. But rather, what is the glue that bonds the following, right? I mean, the people that have bought into these alternative systems, why did they buy into them? They bought into them because it makes them feel good, like they're not bad for what they're doing. And two, it lines up with their sense of what it means to be responsible to a child. Maybe not in the granular, not in the particulars that we're talking about, but in the warm fuzzies, it feels like, gee, that's the right way to be responsible to stewarding this child. That's a good energy for us to build a different bridge into.
Right. Well, to do that, I mean, step one would be teacher training. Absolutely.
Step one seems to be teacher orientation.
I don't know. District superintendents, you talk to them and you tell them about the program. They never heard of follow-through. They know nothing about the program. And then when you tell them about the data that we've had, they say things like, now you expect me to believe that you've got this program, you generated all this data, and you're able to teach these kids all that thing, and school districts like mine aren't picking it up? I don't think so. But that's the way it is. I mean, the communication is so poor, but they're operating from the wrong. They're not going to.
But this comes back to orientation. We're misoriented fundamentally. The teaching community, the parenting community, all of it.
And we're not. It's not physics. We're not going to go from general principles down to program construction. If anything, we'll go like the Wright brothers now, from the flying machine to general principles. But when you derive those principles, you have principles of instruction in this field, not principles of learning, not principles of child development, not principles of some things that have not anything to do like sociographics.
But the very way that you put that, it could be off-putting to people that are all on about learning and philosophy and child development. And the interesting thing is that underlying these differences, there's alignment. There's the potential for alignment.
There is a potential.
And that's where we got to be working.
Right. But I think if you had to boil it down to one thing, one barrier, what is it? Specificity and knowledge of specificity. See, with this other stuff, you can gloss over. You can, kind of like, you can sound good even when you're being bad. because you never have to deal with the concrete examples and the actual consequences that occur in this situation right now. And yet, that's where the action is. That's where all the action.
But in the specifics, this thing can translate down to this inside-out participation and the feedback loop through instruction.
Right.
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 So, but that is a place where we can bring alignment, I believe.
I'm willing to take a shot at it. I mean, it's a tough nut to crack, but I think maybe.
But we got to put our heads in it, just like we were saying about the dog.
Right.
Right. I mean, we've got to live in that space to learn our way through it.
Well,
we're not going to visit it every 3 or 4 years and make a breakthrough.
Right.
There.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.